So, Josie, thank you so much for being with us on the Flower Lounge.
Thank you for having me, Katie. I've been looking forward to it.
I'm so excited for this conversation, and I discovered your work. As you know, I don't even know how I stumbled upon that article. I must have been doing research for some reason for my dogs, and I'm just gonna post for the listeners who are intrigued. I'm gonna post a link up to that article in the blog post for this podcast because that was like what turned me on so much to your work, and why it turned me on was the fact that you were sort of drawing attention to the fact that when pharmaceuticals are no longer useful in the human capacity, they are then sometimes passed along to the animal realm. And whoa, wow, everyone should know that. What can you tell us about that, being from inside the profession?
It was when I wrote this article, I didn't necessarily know that. And it was upon researching for the article that I discovered that. I knew that the pharmaceutical industry has always used animal testing.
Right.
So a lot of drugs will start out at the animal level, and then they'll go into human trials. If the human trials don't work, like there's a really famous arthritis drug called Rimadyl, where that was slated as a nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory for humans. And when they started doing the human trials, they realized there were really severe side effects, where they weren't getting the side effects yet in dogs, or not as bad. So they shifted it back into the dog realm. And I know about that because I was in my last year of veterinary school when all of that was taking place. But this particular drug was a drug that I started seeing. I get a lot of, my practice is more on a referral basis. So people will call me up after they've been to the regular veterinarian, sometimes multiple specialists, where they aren't getting the results for their animal they want to see. So then they turn to traditional Chinese veterinary medicine or holistic therapy. So I started seeing a lot of dogs coming to me on gabapentin, and they were being taken off the nonsteroidal anti-inflammatories and put on gabapentin. And it just was all of a sudden within a year's time, and something just didn't sit right with me, because the dogs I was seeing that were on it were not improving in terms of their pain. They were not able to walk better. They were groggy. They just, and so I was like, something's up with this drug. So I sat down to write an article for it. I was asked to write an article, and I started doing research. And I think it's really important to look back into the history of the drug. When was it released? Why did the FDA first give approval for it? And so I started doing this, and I realized that the FDA gave approval for this drug for a very rare kind of seizures in humans. But then the drug manufacturer, once they got approval, told their drug reps to go out and tell doctors, human MDs, oh, this is great for neuropathic pain. So they started prescribing it wildly for neuropathic pain in the human realm, and some pretty severe side effects started showing up.
Like
And
what?
so they called it a syndrome, like a rage syndrome. People would get depressed. It was affecting them mentally. It was also, I've talked to some people where it just really wigs them out. Now, the name of the drug is I don't know why they named it gabapentin. GABA is a neurotransmitter in the brain that's an inhibitory neurotransmitter, but the drug gabapentin has nothing to do with that neurotransmitter. And in fact, when the FDA released it onto the market, they did not even know the physiological mechanism of the drug in the body. They didn't know what receptors or what it was affecting, which is just kind of shocking to think
Right?
that, yeah, because they're going to give people this drug and they don't really know what it's doing for sure in the body. So anyways, they had a huge lawsuit because of all the side effects on the human end. And
I used to be a crisis counselor when I first came back to the US after traveling, and I remember a lot of clients being on that drug, and they were the clients who had what do you call it? What do they call it? Like anger
It
management issues,
really?
which is interesting to me because, sometimes you discover that actually, which comes first, the chicken or the
Yeah, the
egg,
drug
and
or the anger, and
what's
if they were prescribing it thinking it was related to GABA, that would mean it would calm down the neurotransmitters in the brain, but it's not related to GABA.
so it might actually exacerbate symptoms.
Yeah, and they didn't find out. I found the paper where they found out the mechanism of action. I think it was back in 2010, and that was, or maybe a little later, and they found out it affected calcium channels in the body, in
Ooh.
the cells, which are a whole different ballgame. That can affect your heart. That can do all kinds of different things. So, anyways, when the drug was in a huge settlement with Pfizer, $40 billion, the largest drug settlement ever in the history of the pharmaceutical industry. And that same year happened to be when articles started showing up in veterinary journals using it in animals. I mean, it was such a huge coincidence. And I went back and I searched through the literature, and then I found a paper. I'm gonna have to think about that because I just like totally spaced it out.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. But anyways, there was a group in Stanford research center, and it was kind of primary. It wasn't medical research, it wasn't pharmaceutical, it was like primary scientific research paper that was looking at gabapentin, and they showed that it had a really, really severe side effect. They showed, this is what it was. They discovered, they were working on neuroplasticity, which is a
Yeah.
huge area of research right now, that they're discovering that the brain can actually make new contacts and repair itself. They found that gabapentin inhibits the enzyme in the brain that is necessary for the brain to repair itself.
Heartbreaking.
Now, this was hidden away in some like primary scientific journal, and it was, this really small research group. So now we're seeing reports of animals getting cognitive
Mm.
disorders after they've been on the drug. I've taken I have a very small practice. I've taken 4 animals off of it already. One was a standard poodle last week. 7 days after being off the drug, the dog was more aware. He'd walked around his house more than they said he'd ever walked around the house since he'd been on it. His personality was back out. He was like interacting with me. And when I saw him the first time, he was just in this shell. It was
Oh,
really sad. So
heartbreaking.
it is heartbreaking. And yet, my profession, I teach at the acupuncture school for veterinary acupuncture school. And so I mention these things to the students I'm teaching who are veterinarians out there. And they're like, oh, we love that drug. They say it's great. And they're just prescribing it. They're prescribing it to cats and everything else. And I make them promise. I say, will you please just go and do a literature search on that drug? And they come back and tell me now. I don't even know if they know how to do a literature search anymore, is the problem. But it's really, I think we have Google available and people can do it themselves. But yeah,
So
you
it
really,
sounds to me, and this is going to make a big leap because, I
mhm.
mean, the veterinarians of the world, they have the biggest hearts for animals, and
Oh,
I'm a
yeah.
big animal lover. And so I'm not sending any fault towards a veterinarian, but if vets are too busy to do the research, it really just falls upon us as the owners of the animals and the pets to
Yes,
take charge, right?
exactly.
I think I reached out to
Exactly.
you a couple weeks or maybe a couple months ago. I was doing some research because one of my baby dogs, one of my youngest dogs, she has a heart murmur, and we
Mm.
we took her to get her teeth cleaned with no anesthesia, and the woman said, "Oh, nope, she's getting too excited and she's got like a stage 4 heart murmur. Did you guys know that?" Oh, we didn't know
Oh,
that.
wow.
And
Uh-huh.
so I brought her to do like an echocardiogram,
Mhm.
and they looked at the chambers and the valves of her heart, and the fella said that ever since there has been this like surge of taking dogs off of wheat, that the types of food that have replaced it, and I don't know, I'm going to ask you what your feeling is on this,
Oh, this is a big one. This
that
is a
they've
biggie.
that they've seen a
Mhm.
huge increase in incidences of heart murmurs. But I will also say that the drug that he said, you need to get her on this like right away because she's still at the, stage where it can help her and et cetera, et cetera, et
Mhm.
cetera. But when I really did some digging, right, I'm looking at forums. So I'll write in the drug
Mhm.
name and forum, and I want to know like what actually are pet owners seeing, and
Mhm.
the amount of pet owners that I saw in relation to this particular drug saying it made my dog worse, it made my dog XYZ, XYZ, and it was all not good news. And so
Yeah.
even though I had two trusted vets tell me, I haven't seen anything bad, I think it's
Mhm.
okay, I think it's all right, I just had to look at that research and say, I can't do it. I can't do it. And
Yeah.
a year later, she's relatively fine.
Okay. What kind of
So
dog is she?
pit bull mix.
Okay. Okay, so there's 2 things here, the wheat and the dilated cardiomyopathy. Number 1, murmurs aren't usually formed by dilated cardiomyopathy. It can be hypertrophic cardiomyopathy or a different kind of heart disease. Number 2, wheat does not prevent heart disease. What has come out with this, and there's a lot going, it's a huge topic, and a lot of us are just tired of even discussing it because it's so crazy the way they use this. It was almost like a fake news spin. Is there was enough of people buying food outside of the 3 main pet food manufacturers, which happens to be Hills, Royal Canin, and Science Diet. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and say the names, that they were losing a large market share. A large enough market share that they're getting concerned and trying to jump on the bandwagon of probiotics and offering different things like this. But there was a study done out in California on golden retrievers, 300 golden retrievers, and he noticed among those 300 golden retrievers, 30 of them had heart disease, and all of the dogs just happened to be on grain-free diets. Now, grain-free diets have been out there a long time, and there's been a lot of them out there, and all of a sudden, a veterinarian who's a board certified nutritionist, jumped on that, saying that, well, it's the boutique dog foods with the grain, that where they aren't putting grain in there, that is causing the heart disease.
Oh, correlation, not causation.
Exactly. Correlation. Now, it just so happened she works for Purina. Okay. So that's at the outstart. Now, when you look at it, there are different things, there's different things going on. There is a big concern that golden retrievers might have a genetic predisposition to it. There's another discussion about the grain-free pet foods are, instead of using corn and wheat and soy to hold the kibble together, they were using peas and lentils. And there
Right.
is a possibility peas and lentils, when you add it to the whole nutritional analysis, it increases the protein percentage in the food. So there's a question of whether some of these pet food manufacturers, pea protein is a lot cheaper than meat protein. So there's a question whether they were lowering the amount of meat in the food, still maintaining their protein levels. But if you lower the amount of meat and add pea, you change the entire amino acid profile of the food. Now, there's a major amino acid, which we know from the 1970s, that cats need in order to make their heart muscle healthy, and it's called taurine. But none of these, it could be because there's lowered meat, there's not enough taurine in there. Dogs can make taurine out of 2 other amino acids. Are those amino acids in a lower thing? But the interesting fact is none of these dogs that had this heart disease, when they tested blood taurine levels, none of them were low. So there's all these mismatched pieces, and none of it makes sense. Except the one thing that's happening is Purina got on the bandwagon and they sent warning letters out to all the veterinary clinics, scaring them, telling people to go, don't use grain-free foods. And they have a huge Facebook's website up on how Purina Pro Plan is the answer, and none of the dogs on Purina Pro Plan are getting heart disease. Now, if you look at the ingredients of Purina Pro Plan, the reason it works so well is they have this, the initial ingredients are horrific, and then they have this vitamin mineral premix that's high in taurine. So the whole thing is, it was almost like a huge media fanfare in order to sell more kibble. And that's
Okay.
kind of the the gist of it right there, and
Okay.
scare a lot of pet owners.
Oh my god. Okay, so bottom
Yeah.
line is, if anybody out there listening is like me and has a pet with a heart murmur,
Mhm.
it's okay to continue giving them wheat-free food. You just wanna make sure they're getting enough meat and maybe lay off the peas a little bit, right?
And feed them some heart. Feed them some good muscle meat.
Mhm.
Feed them some real muscle meat, and they're gonna get their amino acids. I have some Maine Coons who have heart disease, and they get ground up beef heart every day as part of their meal.
Oh my god. Okay, so that's one of the things. I had a dog until she was 17, and that was Joy. She just died
Mhm.
about a year ago, and she lived 2 years longer, I think, than she should have because of flower essences and beef heart. Like, every
At
night,
the
seared beef heart. It was like it was
Yeah, there you
that stuff is
go.
magic.
Heart and liver, if you can find good liver, good quality, but
Usually
yeah.
at Whole Foods, they would have a brand called Eel River, and you could buy it
Uh-huh.
frozen and, like, defrost little,
Yeah,
portions
little
of it.
parts of it. Yeah.
That it's like magic.
Yeah, it is, and honestly, I'm telling most of my clients right now, I'm trying to get everybody off of kibble because kibble to me is like eating Cheerios. They take the worst of the worst quality of proteins and whatever they're adding in there, and then they put it into rendering furnaces. So they bake all the nutrients out of it, and then they add in these pre-mixed vitamins and minerals. So it's
Which is probably questionable. It's like us taking
oh, very.
multivitamin, right? Like, how much of it are we actually absorbing?
A synthetic multivitamin. And actually, Hills has had a big problem this last year. They didn't mix up the premix properly in some of their foods, and animals were getting vitamin D toxicosis. About 5,000 dogs died from vitamin
Oh,
D
oh,
toxicosis.
oh no.
So, because of the vitamin mineral premix. So, they scare people about, oh, you're not going to have a balanced diet, but whole food it's so much better for them. And there's
Okay,
some mini options out there for it.
okay, let's talk about that. Let's
Uh,
just talk about food because, people are busy, and, sometimes I would
Yeah.
tell folks like, "Yeah, I make my dog, without meats, and we cook meats, and we do oatmeal and veggies," and
Mhm.
it really doesn't take that much time.
No, it doesn't. And if they wanna buy a commercial version, there are so many good commercial versions out there right now. There's commercial versions of cooked foods and raw foods. So there's almost like when I first started practicing 20 years ago, I was telling people, "Here's their recipe. You need to ask the butcher to grind up your bones for you, and go through all this." And some people still do that if you have the time. But there's other options as well. So
Any
there's really no
recommendations?
excuses. My my all-time favorite, and I probably shouldn't do branding things here, but my all-time favorite food is Answer's pet food. That's what my two cats and dogs are on. They are literally as close to farm to table as you can get. They contract with their own farmers. They have their own goat herd. They do a lot of raw dairy. They have raw fermented goat's milk, kefir from Jersey cows, raw fermented kefir. They use fermented vegetables in their meat so that you
Is
get
it
this
do they make any human
amazing
food?
Billy Hokeman, their nutritional advisor, he drinks their cow kefir every day. I keep asking him, I'm like, "I wanna eat your food." But I've seen it I've literally seen it reverse disease in dogs and cats. My own 15-year-old
Wow,
I diagnosed with hyperthyroidism, and he's down to a quarter of the medication he should be on right now.
wow.
So, yeah, it's the fermentation, though. It's the gut health.
Mhm.
But there's other good companies as well.
And is it raw food or cooked food?
This is raw food, but it's all ground up, so it comes almost like a pate. So they use the bones, the cartilage, the organ, liver, kidney
All the
is
good
all in there.
stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And what is your take on I've heard vets before say like, well, if your dog's elderly and they haven't really had much raw food, you might want to do cooked or, what's your take on how much raw versus cooked and which types of animals you might want to introduce that to?
I go if I have an older animal and they wanna go to raw, I just transition them really slowly, and actually, I used to use like a lot of probiotics and enzymes, and now I'm using the raw fermented goat's milk. I'll just have them start pouring that right on the kibble. And what that does, it
Whoa.
provides like 200 different species of probiotic. It has all the digestive enzymes that are live working in there. It's a complete amino acid profile. It's super high in taurine for the heart. And so when you start adding that in, it actually starts changing their whole metabolism and their whole gut health over and starts healing it all up. Because a lot of these dogs, kibble is filled with GMOs. So they have, IBS, IBD, their whole digestive tract is just racked. And then they've usually been on multiple antibiotics to treat that. So you've got to do, we're even doing fecal implantation in some of them.
Really?
But yeah, yeah, because it's such a severe issue. There's a
Wow.
there's a company called Animal Biome, and you can send in the feces from your dog, and they will do a whole profile on your dog's microbiome, and then they will send you healthy feces in capsules to implant.
Whoa.
Yeah. But it's kind of like in Chinese medicine, the spleen stomach school, they always talk about getting that digestion and that center, that earth element strong. And if you don't have that going, everything else kind of falls apart.
What are the top reasons that folks bring their pets to see you? Like, what are the sort of like the top concerns? Is it IBS? Is it digestion? Is it allergies? Like, what are the main symptoms happening with animals?
A lot of them is old age problems or diseases like arthritis. Most of it's inflammatory diseases, arthritis, seizures that are uncontrolled,
Mm.
allergies, which is just inflammation in the skin and immune system problems, autoimmune problems, cancer, because they just don't want to go down the conventional cancer route,
Mm.
or they want to try everything possible while they're going the conventional cancer route. And unfortunately, it's a lot of chronic diseases that kind of serve to people to wake them up, and then I'll have repeat clients, so then they can start out with puppies and things where we can get them on a much better start to life. I'm seeing a lot of diabetes.
What percentage, out of curiosity, do you think of what you're seeing, inflammation and chronic stuff, is due to the food and GMOs and kibble and stuff?
Huge. I mean, I would say probably 80-90%, honestly.
Oh,
Well, and on top of the food, you then have the vaccines. So,
oh God.
dogs aren't, animals aren't vaccinated as kids, but I mean, our kids now are getting like what, upwards of 30 vaccines now, which is insane. I got like 5, period. But our animals there are still people asking them to come in every year to get
Oh,
vaccines.
yeah.
When there was a study done by the University of Wisconsin immunology department, Dr. Ronald Schultz, and another immunologist, Gene Dodds, out in California, they did a rabies challenge study, which is the top of the line gold standard. And they took a group of beagles and they kept them isolated. They vaccinated them one time as puppies with rabies, kept them completely isolated in like this stage level 4 isolation area. When they were 5 years old, 5 years after the first rabies vaccine, actually, they challenged them with the actual rabies virus. They exposed them all to the rabies virus itself,
Okay.
and none of them got the virus. So they wanted to carry it out longer, but it's a really expensive study to do. And then you have this whole population of dogs that's, they try to do as best as they can taking
Well,
care of them, but
okay. Let's just back up here. How many rabies cases have you seen in your life
I
where a
haven't
client
seen
brings in an animal and
No,
says,
I haven't seen any, but I've lived in rabies endemic areas. I practiced for a while out in New Mexico, and there was rabies in the coyotes there. There was rabies down here in Florida in Fort Lauderdale. We had rabies for a while in the raccoon population.
but does that translate to dogs
It can
if
if
they
the
get
dogs
bit?
are out there getting bit. You have to
Okay.
get bit by the animal.
Okay.
It
So
has
for an animal that is living in the city, that their owners just take them on their little walks every day,
Yeah.
and then they go back in the house and they go back in the backyard and they run around in the backyard. Like, what sense does that make if they're not in an endemic area, and they're not having any
It's
interaction with raccoons and coyotes? Does it make sense to do
it's
rabies vaccines?
very low risk, but the reason the laws are so tight is because there's if a human gets it, and I actually knew somebody down in Peru who he was running for an election down there in this small little town, Ollantaytambo, and he got bit by a rabid dog there and ended up dying. Yeah, I met his wife and kids down there, but the reason it's that everybody's so strict on it is there's no cure for it. There was actually a little boy who got bit by a rabid bat last year here in Florida, in Central Florida. Now his father found the bat in the middle of the day flopping around, put it in a bucket, had it in a bucket in his garage, and he was out there with a 6-year-old working on something, and the little boy stuck his hand down in the bucket
Oh,
and got bit, and he died from rabies. So
yikes.
it's out there, and people aren't to, but the point is now we have 3-year licensed rabies vaccines. With this challenge fund, they should be able to come out with a 5-year licensed rabies vaccine, which at that point, your dog would, if you did it every 5 years, they would only need maybe 3 for their entire life, if that.
Versus 15.
Yeah, versus 15.
And if we talk about side effects, and you probably know more of the inside story on side effects, I can only speak to my personal experience. But I remember, for this very reason, right, Maricopa County was like, well, you need tags on your dogs.
Yeah,
And in order to get the tags,
you have to get the rabies.
you have to get right. So every year. So we had gotten another rescue dog. So I had at the time 2 dogs, got them both
Mhm.
vaccinated for rabies. And like a week later, they both had incontinence.
Wow.
Why?
You're
For a
adding when you're
long time, I might add.
wow,
Like,
that's interesting.
I was like, I'm not doing rabies vaccines anymore. And so
Yeah,
I just
that's really
didn't
interesting.
do the tags.
Because, well, incontinence in Chinese medicine is a kidney qi deficiency, and when you're bombarding those vaccines, obviously drained some of the kidney qi in essence, from the dogs, is how I would look at it from TCVM. But you can see all different kinds of things after vaccines, because what you're actually doing is taking the antigen, you're taking a piece of the virus that's chopped up and asking the body to react as if the body had the virus to make the antibodies. So when you do that with multiple viruses and multiple things, and our bodies are already being bombarded by toxins and all these other things, then it's like the immune system goes on high drive. It's like plugging too many things into the outlet and the circuits blow. And then you can actually jump over into an autoimmune where the body just starts overreacting to every little thing. They can't, to create an actual correlation and causative effect, it's really difficult. So that's how come they can say, well, how can you say the vaccines are causing it? But everybody has those cases where I had a Jack Russell, it was 8 years old. It usually happens around 6, 7, 8 years old. People think they're doing the right thing by going in and getting all the vaccines every year. And then the body just, this little dog showed up with all these lumps, hard lumps all over his body, lost his eyesight. They
Oh,
biopsied the lump, and the pathologist had never even seen anything like it. He couldn't even hardly put a description on the lump, and they just categorized it as an autoimmune vaccine reaction.
wow.
So lots of strange things happen after vaccine.
Any other types of side effects that you've seen?
Oh, allergies. I've had people come in with, all of a sudden the dog has seizures, or when I see a chronic case, one of the first things I ask them is, when were their last vaccines given? I'll ask them when they saw the symptoms start, and then I'll ask when the last vaccines were given. And if it's a vaccine reaction, it's usually within 2 weeks to 2 months. And
Wow.
I see a lot of that.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, there are homeopathic remedies that you can give to kind of help clear that. But once the body's already affected, it's really hard to reverse.
So you, as their vet, would recommend doing it only every 3 to 5 years?
By law, you can do it only every 3 years. You can get a 3-year rabies vaccine. Now, the thing is the rabies laws are by county, they're not even by state.
Right.
So it depends upon what county you live in and if they accept the 3-year rabies vaccines, you know.
Got it.
Now, there are counties that will accept medical waivers. Because if you open up the package insert again on the rabies vaccine, which everybody, and you can find that online, everybody should read the package inserts on everything. It says not to vaccinate an animal that's immunocompromised.
Mhm.
Well, immunocompromised could be going through their spay and neuter surgery. A lot of animals get all their vaccines when they go in to get spayed and neutered, which is a lot of stress right there. So the
Right.
body's under stress, their immune system's under stress. Any dog with allergies, which is an immune system problem, any dogs with seizures, any dogs with cancer, any dogs with any autoimmune conditions, even IBD, I wouldn't. Anything like that. It's a sick animal. And that means that you can't count on their immune system responding correctly to the vaccine.
I mean, yeah, right? That's like, what would we say? It's like we're having a baby or a hysterectomy, and then we're also getting a bunch of vaccines. Like
Yeah.
that isn't something
Or
that we would typically do for humans
yeah,
at
or
the
if you
same
if
time.
you're sick with the flu and have fever and everything and you go in to get a flu shot, does that doesn't make sense.
Mm-mm. Not at
You
all.
know? Yeah, yeah.
And have you seen what about allergies? Like, so
Mm.
if folks have rescue dogs and then, somewhere mid their part of their life, they're like, wow, they're itching with everything. They can't eat anything. And they do an allergy panel and it's like they're literally allergic to every grass, veggie. But to me, that doesn't say, oh, we need to put this dog on an allergy medication. It says, actually, we
Mhm.
should go back to the root cause and look at the immune system. Would you agree?
Yes. Now the next two beyond gabapentin, the two big drugs out there right now, Dr. Judy Morgan just wrote a great article about Apoquel, and I had put up a piece on Facebook as well about Apoquel. I put up the package insert on Apoquel. It's a pill, and Cytopoint is the injection. They work really well. They stop the itching. Apoquel, when it first came out, was labeled to be used for 5 days. Now dogs are on it every day for years
Oh my
because
God.
it works so well. The word
Mm.
neoplasia is mentioned 3 times in the package insert of Apoquel.
What does that mean?
Cancer.
Oh God.
So
Well,
if the dog comes down with cancer, stop the Apoquel.
okay,
Yeah,
that's too late. Why
it's
don't
a
we
little
ask
too late.
why don't we
Exactly.
ask what's creating
Yeah.
the itching in the first place, right?
And a
Rather
lot of
than
it, yeah, it's like I go back to gut health. I detox them. I change their diet, number one. If they're eating wheat and corn and soy, and there was a dog food, a dog treat. This I just put up on Facebook too. There's a dog treat that's supposed to help with dental tartar and dental health. There were 5 forms of sugar in this dog treat. So the sugar alcohols, erythritol, sorbitol, glycerin, and sucrose and blah blah
isn't
blah
erythritol toxic to dogs?
in large amounts. Yeah. So it's like it's the sugar industry just being subsidized by dog treats, and you have to read you have to read the fine print on the dog food labels. There'll be molasses, there'll be cane sugar, there'll be one of the kidney diets has sucrose, good old white table sugar. And dogs and cats, we don't need we shouldn't be eating sugar, but why are we feeding to our animals? You know. So read the fine print on the labels, make sure nothing's coming from China. Read the pack, ask your veterinarian for the package insert on the drugs, but most of them can be found online these days. And if you don't understand a word like neoplasia,
Look it up.
there's a dictionary right on your computer. Look it up.
So for every pet owner who goes to see a vet and they recommend a medication or a procedure, they should, before they give their animal XYZ, go do a bunch of research because in
Yeah.
my experience, you're not often given the side effects,
You
correct?
you aren't. And I think and approach your vet. Just say, "I wanna be educated about what I'm giving my pet, and, I looked this up online, and this is a concern, and this is a concern. Are there any other options that you can provide me?" So try to I think a lot of vets get very intimidated and they feel threatened and because the people don't trust them and this and that. But tell them I want to work with you and try to get them on their side and ask for other options. There's more and more vets. I'm training vets all the time on how to find acupuncture points. like,
Awesome.
you know. So there's more and more vets taking those classes and I'm teaching them acupuncture, but I'm trying to plant seeds in their head about nutrition and vaccines and other things as well. So I think there's a wave building, and if they've heard it, the more they hear it, and the more they hear it in a non-judgmental, non-confrontational way with their clients, then they may say, let me look into that and let me see if I can come up with some options for you.
Well, because ultimately these are the doctors that love animals, right?
Exactly, and they do, otherwise you wouldn't go into the kind of debt we do and go through, the
This
work that
training.
we do, the training and everything else if we didn't love animals.
And what kind of results have you seen with traditional Chinese medicine woven into veterinary medicine? What
Oh, it's
inspires you about that?
it's what I primarily use. I use it because I went to veterinary school because I wanted to practice holistic or alternative medicine on animals. And when I found out about I actually started reading about traditional Chinese veterinary medicine before 10 years before I went to vet school. And it fascinated me that here's a medical system, a complete medical system that's thousands of years old. They're still using herbal remedies and formulas 3,000 years old. Penicillin's 50 years old, you know? you so they've got to be doing something right and it's got to be helping the body. And the reason I liked it is it gave me a different framework on how to look at the body. It gave me the philosophy and framework on the energetic system of the body, and from that I can, like, half of my brain works that way, half works with Western, but I can interpret back and forth, and it does so much. What I see it I just started a couple new cases last week, and within 2 weeks the people are like, their eyes are brighter, and they went over to their toy box for the first time and pulled out a toy. And this one little dog, this little dachshund who's 16 years old, she's like, he was out in the backyard chasing butterflies. And that just like warmed my heart. So if sticking some acupuncture needles in them can make them feel good enough to go chase butterflies, it's worth it.
Oh my god.
So
Well, and then I also love the fact that you can empower your clients to, like, if you're not there to do the needling as often as they need, they can do acupressure points,
yes,
right?
yes, and I teach them how to do Tui Na massage techniques and, give them, and then I incorporate some of the flower essences in with them too, and let
How
them massage
what
those
have you
in.
seen in terms of effective, or what have you seen working with flower essences in animals?
Well, I've worked with them for like 20 years in my practice, and I started out with the Bach, the basic Bach set, and then went to the Flower Essence Society, and then I just started making some of my own out of these amazing flowers that came into my life last year. But animals, they don't have the placebo effect. So what
Correct.
I'll often do is, especially with cats, you can put some drops in their water bowl. The people they don't have to sit there and shove something in their mouth. I just have them put the drops in the water bowl, and I've had things like households of cats that are fighting that then the owner comes home and finds them all sleeping together on the bed. So it it smooths things out in such an incredible way. They're so subtle, but they work just miraculously. I love
I
them.
feel like they work in some ways so much more quickly with animals too.
Yeah,
Like they can just assimilate them just with no barrier, no resistance. It just like comes
because
in and
they don't have any resistance, most of them
right.
don't. And
Sweet.
also, I see a lot of animals, this kind of gets out there, but a lot of animals taking on diseases, patterns, like miasms from their people and from the household.
Oh,
And
you just said a magic word. Can I stop you there?
yeah.
This is a really juicy topic. Miasms is something I studied a lot with my flower essence teacher almost 20 years ago, and I have talked very little about it. In fact, zero, because I felt like people maybe weren't ready to talk about it. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about it. You may even, I mean,
It's
it's a big thing in
time.
homeopathy,
It's
but
time.
it's just like that energy imprint. I mean, I've seen it in whole households where they'll get the same disease symptoms. And I think that's where flower essences, and that's why I started making some of my own. It kind of came through. It's like I didn't have a choice. The flowers were like jumping into my path on the sidewalk, literally screaming, going, "Here, we're here. We want to be used. Pick us, use us for medicine." And my dog actually helped me point them out to me. And that's why I started Molly and Me, because it was really my German Shepherd. She's like, "Look at this flower," you know. But I think it can, if you tell people your animal's picking up some of your disease, and they get all guilty, but I think the essences can help create that separation, either help the animal work through it so it doesn't impact them
Well, and some of those
physically.
miasms are like you couldn't really take blame for it anyway, right? Like
Yeah.
my flower essence teacher used to talk about like the heavy metal miasm or the chemical miasm,
Mhm.
and so some of these things are just in our environments. They kind of affect our energies in certain ways, right? And then you're saying that out of sympathetic resonance or compassion or love,
Yeah.
our pets are taking on our energetic patterns, which
Yeah.
manifest in physical symptoms.
Yeah.
What percentage of the time do you see pets coming in with similar issues as the owner physically? Or do you even talk about that?
A lot of times what'll happen is I'll see the animal and I'll tell them what's going on with their animal, or I'll make a recommendation, and the person's face will literally change or go white, or they'll just step back going, "I can't believe you just said what you just said, because that's exactly what I'm going through." Or or my acupuncturist recommended for me. Or I mean, I had this happen in vet school. I was on oncology rounds, and I had to go in. It's like the first day, and I hadn't seen this person and their dog before, but the resident handed me the biopsy results and said, "Go tell them their dog has nasal adenocarcinoma," which, it's a rough diagnosis to tell somebody. And this man was there. He's in his 50s, probably lived alone. He had this little poodle on the table.
Mm.
And I said I told him the biopsy results had come back, and this is what's going on, the type of tumor. And he turned white and fell against the wall. And I thought I was going to have to pick him up off the floor. And he
Oh.
just started sobbing, and he said, "You're not," and I just gave him the space. I just sat there and held space for him until he could gather his voice back. And he said, "You're not going to believe this, but I had that same type of tumor that just went into remission 2 months ago."
Oh.
And that's when his dog showed up with the symptoms of it. So it was like it just whew, you know yeah. So it's things like that where you just can't. It's not like I'm seeing it and making it up, but yeah.
Yeah, it's that incredible compassion that they have.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes they're like
And
little bodhisattvas.
right.
They really are.
So I always think, sometimes I recorded like a solo cast a couple months ago about flower essences for dogs and cats. And one of the things I said was, if you are taking a flower essence remedy, give it to your pet, because
Yeah, yeah,
it's likely that we need the same things as our pets because we're sharing
yeah,
energy, right?
exactly, exactly. And I think the flower essences can kind of intersect that and
Break the
stop it.
pattern.
Break, yeah, it breaks the pattern. It cuts the pattern.
It
And it's such a It unravels it.
It takes
I've
out
been
the miasm. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, and I've been taking my own essences as I've been making them this whole past year, and then I've been doing all of the stone work and taking the stone elixirs, and my life can't my life is unraveled, but in such a gentle, good way. A lot of people have left, a lot of things have left, but I'm left in this space that's very just open and zen-like and, you know, really good.
Often take note of like what flowers are blooming in the backyard. You know, when sometimes
Mhm.
like weeds or strange flowers will pop up. And I remember when my dog Joey was alive, she had some internal bleeding issues,
Uh-huh.
and we had shepherd's purse everywhere in the backyard.
Oh, wow.
But what's ironic, I mean, this is like the shoemaker's kids have no shoes.
Yes.
I just like I gave her the tincture to stop the internal bleeding, but it didn't occur to me until this year that
To do
I
the
could have made
flower
a flower essence
flower.
out of it, and it might have been just as or more effective.
Yeah.
And I think it's fascinating to think about how actually sometimes the best remedies, especially for animals, are subtle. They don't have to be this big move the dial thing, right?
Yeah. 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 And sometimes the more subtle, the more deep they all go, but they're yeah. That's how
Okay,
I
but
find the stones work.
I want to get into your journey with the stones and ask you more about that. But one last
Yeah.
question for the pet owners,
Yeah.
and it's around any piece of advice you would have around empowering people that there is a part of them that might actually know exactly what their pet needs. And, you know, the fact that we go to specialists, we go to
Mhm.
receive support, and sometimes our gut just knows. And I wondered if you could speak to that.
Because I do house calls. I once was gonna go into a clinic, but I go into the people's environment. I'm sitting on their beds, I'm in their master bathrooms, I'm in the everywhere in their houses treating these animals because I get down to where the animal's comfortable. But what I see is I rely on that person giving me information on their animal, and they do know. People do know what's going on with their animals. They just need somebody to kind of help interpret them and guide them into how to shift it this way or that way. And now, oh my goodness, there is so many resources out there with the internet and online. There's good and bad, but there's amazing resources on how on feeding your pet, on diet, on making homemade diets, whether you want to do raw or cooked. There's like Dr. Judy Morgan is out there. She has a huge online following. Rodney Habib and Karen Becker are both. Karen Becker's a veterinarian, and her advice it's all really good, solid advice. And I'm going to be putting more educational stuff out there as well. Answers Pet Food is out there. There's some really, really, really good ways to get advice. To just ask, you can throw up a case and just say, am I on the right track with this? And I'm a moderator on a huge group that we have like 13,000 followers now. It's Holistic Animal Advice on Facebook. It's a private group, but anybody can join, and there's 6 other veterinarians along with me. So you can literally throw a case up there. We can't diagnose it and tell you exactly what to do, but we can say, listen, you need to go see a vet and get this and this done. Or, yeah, you might tweak this or try this instead.
Wow.
So there's so many resources.
Okay, so we'll take some of those resources and that you mentioned and put them into our blog post so people are looking, they can find the links.
Yeah, at least they can find the good places to go because there's, of course there's everything across the board, but yeah.
Education is so empowering,
It
right?
is. It really is.
And I find that once you start educating, you get like this little piece and something like resonates inside of you like,
Mhm,
"Oh, that's what Gracie needs," or "That's what my cat
mhm.
needs," or like you start piecing together the puzzle in like the most intuitive way as long as you just kind of start the journey of getting educated, right?
Yeah, exactly. You just have to start and kind of dive in somewhere, and that's why I say, like, our one group, Holistic Animal Advice, we have people all across the board. We try not to We're not gonna make you feel foolish for not knowing something. If you feed kibble, don't worry about it. Just get on there and we can help get you on the path wherever you're starting, you know, and
Yeah.
that's been my philosophy in my practice is I figure out where people are and then help them take the baby steps to get to a better place.
We need to clone you like 50,000 times.
Yeah. Yes.
We need more of Josies in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I hear a cat in the background. Do you have 2
Yeah.
cats?
Yeah, I have 2 cats. Yeah. I woke him up from his nap, so
Okay, so shifting gears for the last part to
Mhm.
your own healing journey and how that affects your work. I'm curious how, like, when I look at my business is my path of awakening or part of it. And so whatever I'm experiencing will come up in the business and vice versa. And it's all a part of the package. So if we just talked about your veterinary practice, what's happening with you?
There's a lot. I mean, I feel like I feel like my whole life has been one shamanic journey, you know, literally throughout looking back on it. And so I'm constantly in a state of evolving and pushing the river, and I don't like to stay in one place very long. That's why I loved your whole thing about the podcast of people living on their edge. And I've seen it, it's because it's like I try to keep, you know, moving that edge where I can. And I went through, well, last year I went through a big breakup. I'd been with my partner for like 8 years, and it was a whole like shamanic initiation type of thing. I found him nearly not breathing overdose on
Oh,
opioids
oh,
on Valentine's Day.
oh.
And I thought he was dead when I first saw him, and I was able to rouse him and get him breathing and bring him back from that state. But at the same time, it was like this whole like severing of this connection between us. And I woke up, I haven't showed this very much, but the next morning I woke up and I was in my car to go to my house calls, and this huge turkey vulture was laying in the middle of this highway lane in front of me on this on ramp. Like I didn't know if it was dead yet or not. And it was such a sign. I just had that severed, that cord cutting, and then this huge turkey vulture. But it was like this huge sign from the like divine mother of and the vulture and death and the whole entire thing. And so it sent me on right after that happened, all of these that's when all the flowers started showing up. I was like, I'm not gonna let this just bury me. I could feel the grief and everything else. And I was like, I have things I need to do in the world. And so I started taking my dog out for walks. And literally it was like flowers started jumping in my paths. And I couldn't, it was such a gift from the from the universe, from the flower kingdom. And so I started making essences, and I started taking them, of course, because I'm making them, and hanging out with the flowers and attuning to them and meditating with them. And I spent probably the first 9 months of last year doing that. And it just sent me on an entirely different, just cleared out a lot of things in my life. I was able to see things from a much different perspective and get to a really clear place now. That wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have gone through all that. So, and I also, at the same time last spring, I started studying this stone medicine, the Taoist stone medicine from Jeffrey Yuen's line, one of his primary students. And I feel like the flowers kind of invite you in, and then the stones drill down inside and do this amazing re changing your genetic imprint almost. Yeah. But in a way that you don't, it's like you, how can I say it? You don't, it's not like you have to work at it. It's not like you're getting slammed across the head with it, but things just start happening around you. Your your world starts changing. The illusion, the projection starts shifting. So
Right.
I'm kind of coming out of that and able to, I find myself coming out more publicly because I'm also just coming out of the menopause tunnel. And what I found, and I think that's a big part of my healing journey right now, but I feel like with women with menopause, I use just traditional Chinese medicine to go through it. And I feel like it's a time of taking our power back as women and being able to do more for the community in a communal role, like the elders, like the crones. So kind of like I've cleared the path and I'm ready to start that new chapter.
I love that.
Yeah.
We have a podcast from some time ago with Susan Lipschitz that I think you would get a kick out of.
Okay.
And she talks about it being like an initiation.
It really is, because it's taking that kundalini energy where we're so focused as women on the external or on our partners and on reproducing, and then all of a sudden there's this freedom that happens, and it's like, wait a minute, I don't I don't have to be anything for anybody right now. I just have to be who I am. I don't have to try to be anything for anybody else. And I went to dinner with a friend of mine who's the same age. She's actually doing this whole leadership program in Washington, D.C. With all these high powered people. And we were talking about this, and it was like, wow, we don't have to try to put on a face for anyone or be this way or that way. We can just be who yeah, it's freedom. It's so much freedom. And I hope women can come to that instead of thinking, oh, I'm no good anymore because I can't reproduce or I'm this or that. No, 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 no. This is when we can really create change in the world.
Amen. Love
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So
So, what are your favorite stones and flowers in this very moment? What are you working with?
in this very moment, I found some little tropical chickweed that down here, the spring is coming, and this there's this little patch of forest that's like wild. That's really rare to find in South Florida. And I went out there and it's carpeted with this beautiful green, fresh. And it's not the chickweed that grows up north, it's tropical chickweed. But I'll have a picture of the little itty bitty tiny flower, but they're like little stars all over the ground. So I started working out with that this last weekend. And then prior to that, the snake plant was blooming. So, and I started working with that as well. It's like the whole air purification plant, and interesting. And then I've been working with blue sapphire as a ring, as a stone. So that was part of, I have an interesting story around the blue sapphire. I bought a blue sapphire ring from a jeweler she's on Instagram. She's an amazing jeweler. She does this really like archetypal, like, and she does a lot of custom work, but she had this ring and it is a record keeper with the triangles in it. And it looked like a doorway to a portal, like a portal opening. And the minute I saw it, I was like, oh, wow. I have to I have to at least sit and meditate in the same room with this ring. And I bought it for me for my solstice present, and I've been wearing it. And then last week in the stone medicine course, blue sapphire came up, and it was all about letting things go and kind of cleaning the slate, and exactly described what I have been going through these past 2 months on my journey. And it was like I had to experience the stone and have that experience, and then read somebody else's description of it, 2 months in. But
Wow.
yeah, yeah. Well, and actually it was a closure. Part of it was a closure to my ex. I met up with him and had this amazing, because I had so much anger over it. I was anger over the addiction, anger over the drug, anger, all this external. And I was able to let that go. And I had this heart to heart talk with him on Valentine's Day.
Wow.
So it was major heart healing for both of us. It kind of closed the circle of the karma and everything else that obviously, my part that I had to work through, and his part he had to work through. So it was amazing, an amazing blessing. Yeah.
Life is so beautiful in unexpected ways, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It really is.
Well, thank you for being with us,
Yeah.
and thank you for
Yeah,
being
thank you.
so vulnerable and human and yourself and so powerful and badass in your ways in the world and in your ability to tell the truth and be a truth teller.
Thank you. Thank you, Katie. Thank you for
Yeah.
creating the space for it, you know?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
We should keep in touch and then have you
Yeah.
on maybe do some regular episodes because
Yeah, that would be great.
there's so
Or
many
even
listeners who have pets and
yeah, or we could take like different maybe, I don't know, Q&A, or we could take some different topics that people want to hear about with their pets. That would be great.
yeah, so if you're listening right now and you have a need or a question or a desire or a want, feel free
Mhm.
to email us at LOTUSWEI and let us know so we can keep providing with all the good stuff. And in the
Yeah.
meantime, if they want more from you, Josie, on anything that we talked about, where can they find you?
They can find me at Dr. Josie's 5 elements.com is my website. I'm on Facebook as Dr. Josie Pet Vet. I'm on Instagram as Dr. Josie Pet Vet. So you can always message me on there. I'm on the Facebook group Holistic Animal Advice. You can message me through there as well. And I have my flower essences, which are slow to get going, but they're going, is at molly and me, mollyandme.com. So you can look at our walks through the woods that we do together.
Awesome. And then
Yeah.
if you were to offer lastly any words of wisdom for the listeners or something that you find yourself telling other people, whether it's about pets or whether it's about your own personal work, anything come to mind as your words of wisdom?
I think the biggest thing is to spend some time. It goes back to meditation, you know, to be able to just sit, even if it's for 5 to 10 minutes, and shut down the phones, shut down the technology, and just be able to sit and watch your breath. That would be my biggest thing. I think it would help a lot of people.
What have you noticed that it does for you in your life?
It brings me back to my center and allows me to just slow down and see what's really important. And, you know, we all get pulled off. It's like we get pulled off by samsara into these things, and we need to just, whoosh, yeah, come back to center.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. I hope to come out and visit you sometime.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Yeah, yeah.